All right, in this video, what we're going to do is put together the card database. So the card database is going to be a class that's responsible for having all of the cards loaded in, as well as doing things like generating decks, shuffling the white and black cards, and dealing with discards and so on. So the way I'm actually going to start this off is I'm going to write a helper function that we're going to use to shuffle the items in an array. It'll be used to shuffle the, once you generate a deck, you want to be able to obviously be able to shuffle it, and we'll use it in a couple other instances as well. So I'll just get that out of the way at first. So I'm going to open up shared, I'm going to create a new file called utils.js, and I'm simply going to export function shuffle, which will take an array. Then I'm going to say let counter equals array.length. Then I'm going to say while counter is greater than 0, let index equals math.floor, math.random times counter. Then decrement the counter, 2 dashes. And then I'm going to swap an item. So I'm going to say temp equals array at, well actually, yeah, I'm just going to swap it the old way. I'm not going to use object deconstruction for this. And then array at counter equals array at index, and array at index equals temp, and then I'll simply return the array. So it is an in-place shuffling of an array. And it's just a standard shuffling algorithm. It's not a whole lot else to say about it. Now, before we create the card database, though, I do want to import some card files, some set files. So I'm going to go ahead and create a folder called data, and then underneath data, I'm going to create another folder called sets, and I'm just going to throw in just 3 files that I have that you'll be able to get from the resources of this series. And so obviously you can write your own, import it from different formats or whatever you want. I just happen to have these 3 files all put together already. And you can kind of see the structure of them. Each file has a name, which is the set ID, and then the title, or the name of the actual name of the set, which is going to be, like first edition, second edition, and so on, whatever you want to call it. And then there'll be 2 arrays, one with black cards and one with white cards. The only interesting thing to point out is the black cards will have these placeholders in them. And if a black card does not have a placeholder in it, then it's just you have to play 1 white card for that round. If it has, let's say, 3 placeholders, then you have to play 3 white cards and so on. So we're going to be using a regular expression to find all those placeholders. So with that, let's go ahead and write the card database. So under server, I'm going to create a new folder called models. Then inside of models, I'm going to create a file called cards.js. And we'll start off by importing Lodash. And then we'll import our shuffle. So import shuffle from backup shared utils. Then I'm going to do my regex, which will be const black, or how about placeholder regex, which will simply match globally. It'll match for the curly braces. Now, the curly braces in regular expressions is a symbol that's used, so we have to make sure to escape them both with a backslash. Then I'm going to have a function called getWhiteCardCount that's going to accept text in the form of a black card. And I'm going to say const match equals text.match on placeholder regex. Then I'm going to say if there was no match, then return 1. So we'll have 1 card there. Otherwise, return match.length. And that'll specify how many cards there are. Next up, let's export class card database. I'm just going to write this class from top to bottom. So we'll start off by having a property called sets. Sets is going to return an array of sets with each object inside of it's going to have an ID and a name. So I'm going to simply return lodash.map this underscore sets followed by set goes into ID with the set of ID and name with the set.name. Then we'll do our constructor. All we got to do here is initialize our sets object. And then we'll have an add sets function and an add set function. So we have add sets, but then we'll also have an add set function that takes in a set name followed by the set object. But the add sets function that is going to accept an array of sets will simply do dot for own sets comma, set name goes into this dot add set name set. So it just goes through all of the properties on an object and adds them in. Now for add set, it's pretty straightforward. We're simply going to do this sets at set name equals, the ID is going to be set name, the name is going to be set.name, so that's that property that we're going to get out. I'll just move this over here actually, so you can take a look at the structure. The actual set object is going to be these objects in these JSON files. Then I'll have name, then I'll have black cards is going to equal set.blackcards.map, card and index goes into, and this is just going to be a function that returns an object, so make sure to wrap the object notation with parentheses, otherwise you will get a syntax error. And then I'm going to say ID is going to be a template string of b dash set name dash index. So each card will have a unique ID that's generated when they're added to the card database. The text is simply going to be card.replace blank, or sorry, what did I call that guy? Placeholder regex, followed by some underscores, so that when we render out the black cards, they have underscores in them instead of that placeholder. Then we're going to give a set of set name, and then a white card count of get white card count of card. So that's how we're going to be storing our black cards. Now for our white cards, we're simply going to say set.whitecards.map card and index goes into, and then we're going to do something very, very similar here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and copy these three properties because they're going to almost be used verbatim, except for with the ID, we're going to start with a W dash, and then for the text, we're simply going to say card, just the card itself. Because remember, the card itself is just a string that was pulled in from the JSON file. All right, now we need to write a method for generating decks. So generate decks. It'll take in a set IDs array, which will default to null. Then I'm going to say const sets equals set IDs. If it's not null, then say set IDs.map s goes into this underscore sets at s. Otherwise, go ahead and grab all the values out of the set IDs. Or, sorry, not all the values out of the set IDs, all the values out of our sets. So that's just going to be low dash dot value this underscore sets. And so if we don't provide a set IDs array, it'll just return all of the sets that are added in memory. Then I'm going to say if not sets.length, then we'll throw a new error. Cannot generate deck without any sets selected. Then I'm going to say const white cards equals flat map on all the sets, and simply taking all the white cards and shoving them into a flat array. And then I'm going to say shuffle our white cards. Then I'm going to do the same thing with black cards. So black cards equals low dash flat map sets, s goes into s black cards, and then we'll shuffle our black cards. Then we're going to simply return a new deck with our white cards and our black cards. Now, we haven't written the deck class yet, so let's go ahead and do that right now. So that finishes, this is our card database. There's not any more to it. It's really simple. So now let's go ahead and implement our deck. So export class deck, which will take in a constructor of white cards and black cards. And then I'm going to say underscore white deck equals white cards. This black deck equals black cards. This white discard equals, oops, I want to make this private, so do an underscore there, equals empty array. And then this black index equals 0. The black index variable is going to tell us where along that array of the black cards we currently are. Then I'm going to have a draw white cards count method. And I'm going to say if count is greater or equal to this white deck dot length, then that means we reach the end of the white deck. So we need to take all the cards in our white discard and shuffle them back into the white deck. However, we also need to be able to make sure that there is enough cards to be able to draw from the what's in the white deck as well as what's in the white discard. So I'm going to say if count is greater or equal to this white deck dot length plus this white discard dot length, then we'll throw a new error. Cannot draw count cards since there aren't enough left. Then I'm going to say this white deck dot push dot 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 this white discard. And then I'm going to say this white discard is null, well, not null, empty array, and then we'll shuffle the white deck again. And then at the end of this, I'm simply going to return this white deck dot splice 0 in count. So that'll return X amount of cards. Then let's do our draw black card. That's simply going to say if this black index is greater or equal to this black deck length, then reshuffle our black deck and then set this dot black index to 0. And then otherwise, we're simply going to return this black cards, or black deck at this black index plus plus. So it's just going to continuously draw off the black deck like that. Then I'm going to have a discard white cards method that'll simply say this white discard dot push dot 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 cards. And this is our deck. All right, take one last look at that. What we're going to do now is we are going to jump into our server and actually create our card database and read all these JSON files in. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up our server.js file, not settings, server. And the first thing I'm going to do is I do need to import my card database from our model. So import card database from /model cards. But we also are going to need a couple other packages. So I'm going to need import path from path and import fs from fs. So we're importing the path utilities and the file system utilities. Now, underneath configuration, I'm going to create a new section called services. And this, all this guy's going to do is going to say const cards equals new card database. And then we're going to say const sets path equals path.join. Now, this is actually an interesting thing, an interesting problem. The current dir name, the current thing we're going to be relative to, is actually going to be inside the build folder. So to get to the data folder, we have to back up one. But I kind of don't really like doing that. I don't like having the path of how this, I don't like the path of where we're going to be including files from relatively being impacted by what folder our build artifacts happen to be in. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top level server file. This is the file that's actually executed to run our server, and it installs source map support, and then it shoots off the server request. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep track of the dir name of where the main master server file is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say const path equals require path. Note that I'm not using ES 2015 syntax, module syntax here, because this file is not processed by Babel. And then in between installing source map support and running our server, I'm going to say global.appRoot equals path.resolve dir name. And so now there'll be a global app root variable, which will be a path, an absolute path to the entire root of the project. And so with that out of the way, I'm going to jump back into server, and I'm going to say this sets path equals path join global app root data sets. Then I'm going to say for let file of fs read dir sync of my sets path. I'm going to say const set ID equals path.parse file.name. So the set ID is just the name of the file without the extension. Const set path is going to equal path join sets path file. Then all I have to do is say cards.add set ID followed by JSON parse fs read file sync, passing in our set path, and then for the encoding passing in UTF-8 because we want to load this before we pass it on to JSON parse. We don't want to return a buffer or binary data. We want to load these files up as text. And with that, I should be able to say something like console log cards generate deck, and I'm not going to pass in any set ID here. And so take one last look at this, and then again, here's the top. We just added some imports, and then we have that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just run this and see if it works. So I'm going to say gulp. Actually, I'm just going to do gulp dev. Just launch it all, so then I don't have to worry about doing that in the next video. So let's go ahead and give it a sec. I'll pause. So. All right, and we're back. It seems that I did not set the path to where we were loading. So it's models cards, and I imported model cards. Interesting. So in build, we have models cards. Oh, I did models, didn't I? I meant to say model. Or, yeah, I want model, not models. Generate deck is not a function. Oh, it's generate decks because there's a white deck and a black deck. All right, Lodash default value. It's not value, it's values. See, this is what I get for not doing this in a in a sort of more traditional TDD sort of style where I have my unit tests. But yeah, you know, I just had a couple typos here and there. And it looks like we have a deck. So with that, that pretty much is our card database, and we'll see you guys in the next video.